What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Sacred CEO Micropod. What is a micropod? Well, it's a short version of a podcast where we take about 5 minutes or so a day or throughout the week to just encourage, to build up, to empower Christian CEOs, entrepreneurs, and executives. So I want to take this I contemplated a lot about this. What's the first conversation I want to have? And I actually have a whole list of things that I sat down and wrote out and things that we want to discuss and talk about. But I think this is the very first subject and content that I want to get out because I think it's so critically important, because I have the opportunity to work with lots and lots of people, lots of leaders. I've had the opportunity to impact and influence a lot of leaders and executives. And here is something that is a common thread that is woven in and out in between every leader that we work with or that comes to us and asks for coaching and for mentoring. There is two versions of every leader. There is the 3 p.m. version and there is the 3 a.m. version. The 3 p.m. version is the mover and shaker, the deal maker, the deal closer, the guy or woman that walks into the room and everybody knows they're in the room. They're the life of the party. Everybody have that sort of law of attraction, right? People are drawn to them, the 3 p.m. version. They look like everything's going well. But we have found common with just about everybody that we work with that there's also a 3 a.m. version. And this is the version of that leader who can't go to sleep at night without some sort of external substance to help put them to rest. They can't slow their mind down because they're living in constant fear or anxiety. Their marriages are falling apart. Their home is an absolute and total wreck. There's no true internal peace inside their life or inside their home. They're addicted to drugs. They're addicted to pornography. There's something else going on behind the scenes that nobody really knows about. And here's what happens for every single leader. At some point, eventually, the 3 a.m. version catches up to the 3 p.m. version, eventually transcends that version of you, and it's the version that the rest of the world begins to see. I've watched this happen with so many people who don't have social influence, people who do have social influence. It's a little bit louder and a little more profound and a little uglier when you have a big social media presence. But you've seen it, you've watched it happen. Guys that look like they have everything together, guys that are running marriage podcasts, guys that are just talking about how wonderful their life is and how great things are. I mean, on the surface, everything looks great. And then one day you wake up and you find out their marriage imploded. One day you wake up and find out that they were a silent abuser. Or you wake up and find out, or you get news that they had some sort of drug addiction or alcohol problem. Something happens or something comes to light. And in your mind, you watched them, you loved them, you admired them, you mimicked them, you went to their conferences, you probably maybe got coached by them. And how did this happen? Well, I can tell you this right now. It didn't happen overnight, as it never does. It didn't happen overnight. It's always a slow process. In fact, the Bible talks about how the enemy operates. He doesn't just come in and kill at once. That wouldn't work, right? That would terrify people. We would be able to see that and observe that and witness that and be on to him a little bit more if it was just this fast in and out. The Bible talks about in the book of Proverbs where he sends a dart or an arrow through the liver. They call it a quiver through the liver, right? He sends an arrow through our liver. You know anything about hunting? You know that a liver shot when you're bow hunting is a bad shot, right? When you're in a tree stand, you're pulling back on a deer or some large animal, you're aiming for that heart. The heart is the death shot, right? Hit him, drop him. But a lot of times that animal will move, and what's fascinating about that animal is they might be eating and they might move just a little bit, and you take that shot you thought was a good shot, ends up not being a great shot because it goes through the liver. And here's what will happen. They'll jump, they'll kind of look around a little bit like, that was weird, something hit me, but I don't know what it was, and they'll go right back to eating. And they will sort of scurry off into the woods, continuing to eat until eventually they bleed out and they die. It's not an instant death. This is exactly, by the way, that's how the Bible describes the work of the enemy. It's not always instant. It is a slow process to death, or a slow process to completely being destroyed or taken out. And so here is the, when we get around CEOs and executives and we're having conversations with them, this is the question that we're asking. This is sound a little awkward, but I'll explain it. The question is how naked are you willing to get? How naked are you willing to get? Are you willing to get butt naked? I mean, just butt ass naked. Are you willing to get butt naked? And what do you mean by that, Doc? What do you mean are you willing to get naked? Are you willing to become implicitly and rigorously honest and vulnerable with who you really are? Because I'm going to tell you right now, one of the greatest lies that the enemy will tell us is that vulnerability is our biggest weakness. If we become vulnerable, we become weak. It's a lie of the enemy. Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is actually a sign of real strength. And James, in the book of James, when Pastor James was writing to the church, he said this in James chapter 5 and verse 16-ish, I think. He said, confess your sins or faults one to another. Pray for one another so that healing can begin. This is a really interesting dynamic about where healing comes from. Healing begins at the point of confession. And this is true for lots and lots of leaders, is that they're so terrified of people finding out who they really are, what's really going on, that they will continue, they'll put all of their time and energy to build this sort of front house stage view that looks so great, while this other part is completely eroding and destroying them silently. And as I said, eventually, that part of them transcends the good parts of them, and it becomes visible to the whole world around them. So what's the cure to this? How do we deal with this? Well, the cure is to stop, number one, thinking more highly of yourself than you should. Most of us are legends in our own mind. Let's just put that right out here in front of God and everybody. We're just freaking legends in our own mind. Stop thinking more highly of yourself than you should, number one. Number two, have some people around you. We call this the spiritual board of advisors. Have some people around you that you're willing to get completely butt naked with. You're willing to become as vulnerable as a human being can be. There's no more vulnerability than standing in a group of people being butt naked. That's vulnerability. And so the analogy is am I willing to get naked with who I really am? To get to the core, let all the skin, let everything be seen. Am I willing to confess that I got a porn problem? Am I willing to tell somebody that my marriage isn't as great as it should be, that I'm actually being abusive in my behaviors? Am I willing to talk to somebody and talk about how anxious and fearful I live my life? Am I willing to tell people and admit that I have an alcohol problem or a drug addiction, that there's something going on? Am I willing to actually admit those things? Because outside of the confession and repentance of that, there's no healing. And what you're going to continue to do is you're going to continue this sort of pseudo lifestyle, this sort of pseudo healing, where everybody around you is going to think everything is good, everything's in order. But at the core of who you really are, the inner core of who you really are, you know that it's not. I've watched a lot of really good men and women fall because they weren't willing to get totally naked, to get vulnerable with who they really are. So here's the recommendation. Who do you have around you? You're leading a lot of people, but do you have somebody that's leading you? You have a lot of people that come to you, but do you have somebody to go to? Do you have somebody that's in your corner that's not going to judge you or condemn you? Somebody that's abiding and walking with God, who actually loves you and cares about you and wants the absolute best for you. They're not going to gain or lose by their involvement in your life. They're not looking to get something from you. They're just there because they love you. Do you have somebody in your corner like that? If you don't, I'm telling you right now, that is step that you've got to make that step, because every single one of us have these blind spots. If we're not careful, they're going to eventually be the thing that destroy us, that take us out. May not be overnight, probably won't be, probably going to be a slow death, but we're eventually going to get there and lose everything that we've given our life for, that we've worked hard for, that we've been dedicated to and been passionate about. We're going to end up losing it. You're watching it right now. You're watching men and women fall. You're going to continue to see them fall. And this is the reason why. They have a 3 a.m. version that they're not dealing with, and it's catching up to them. And it's going to catch up to you too. Get some people around you that you can be real with, that you can get naked with and tell them everything. They're going to come around you, stand in authority with you, hold you accountable where you need to be held accountable, pray with you when you need to be prayed over, but are willing to be that sort of wingman or that wing woman. Maybe there's 2 or 3 of them that you bring around you. They're going to help you face the 3 a.m. version of you.